Welcome to the Inquiring Cat Does Politics for the Saturday Rant. This is not so much typical of my Saturday rants when I try and demolish everything with ridicule that's been going on in the world. It's a more pensive and thoughtful contribution this week. I'm speaking to you from Buenos Aires. Where President Milei has been running around with his chainsaw and says that he takes advice from his dogs as to what to do next. It's an interesting situation, but the scandal that broke last week regarding the cryptocurrency event that went on, where the cryptocurrency was launched with his favourite phrase, "Let there be liberty," and within a matter of a few hours the whole thing had collapsed after somebody had cleaned out about $2 billion worth of Argentinian savings. No sign of any problems here on the streets with that. The city's booming in Buenos Aires, construction going on everywhere, and the restaurants and bars are full. But there's going to be some interesting political fallout. The suggestion is at the moment that Milei himself was not behind it, but rather his sister, who acts as his gatekeeper, might be in some way responsible. But talking about such difficult world situations, there was a German guy called Martin Niemöller, who was a great fan of Hitler's in the early days of Hitler, because the German economy had been struggling a bit, and here was somebody who promised to make Germany great again. And Niemöller was a supporter of Hitler's to the extent he was actually an anti-Semite as well. And it was only when Hitler eventually got round to interfering in Niemöller's area of interest, which was telling the church what to do, and Niemöller was a German Lutheran pastor, that he suddenly became anti-Hitler and ended up in Dachau concentration camp for the tail end of the war. Now, the situation that's happening in America is interesting. The Kennedy Center, which is now chaired by one Donald J. Trump, that well-known Pericles of culture, there was the cancellation of the Washington Gay Men's Chorus performing with the National Symphony Orchestra, that got cancelled, and the gay community threw their arms up in horror and said, you see, that's what happens, so it starts, we're being persecuted. And then it came to light that in fact this change in schedule had been decided before Trump took over the Kennedy Center. Now, we don't know, and we'll probably never find out, whether it was in anticipation of there being problems or whether it was just pure coincidence, as the Kennedy Center claimed at the time. And they said that they instead were putting on the Wizard of Oz as something to celebrate World Pride Week. Well, now that's been cancelled as well. And it's very clear why it's being cancelled. And so when you look at the pronouncements coming out of the White House, do you think he would have cancelled the Women's Institute Choir performing with the National Symphony Orchestra? Do you think he would have cancelled a veterans choir singing with the National Symphony Orchestra? No, he wouldn't. You know he wouldn't. He's done it because it's a gay group. And so the ridiculous situation we have now, of course, is that friends of mine in America who are MAGA mad and think that Donald Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread will, I'm quite sure, go, yeah, well, okay, but not everyone's gay, and it's just the small gay community that are upset about this, and anyway, who gives a damn about them? Well, it was Niemöller who wrote the famous poem after World War II about first they came for the trade unionists and there was nobody to stand up and defend them, and then they came for the communists, and then they came for the socialists, and then they came for the Jews, etc. And eventually they came for me, but there was nobody left to stand up and speak for me. And this is the beginning of fascism. And people don't like to admit it, but if you look at the dictionary definition of fascism, an autocrat who denies civil liberties and runs the place like a fiefdom, that is what is happening with Donald Trump in America, and he is a fascist. Now, of course, he's a damn clever fascist. The first thing he did was stack the Supreme Court with his cronies, with right-wing judges, a system I fail to understand because it doesn't give any impartiality to the Supreme Court of the country. But anyway, that's their system. And I'm quite sure that those Supreme Court justices were only too happy to get the jobs, Judge Clarence in particular, who I think seems to like a lot of jobs. Anyway, from what I read. And of course, when then the whole situation came up about the situation of could the president be immune from prosecution, the Supreme Court decided that a sitting president could never be guilty of anything, couldn't commit a crime, and the reason they wanted to do that was because they wanted to see Donald Trump re-elected, because their fear of the left and the Democrats was so great, and they fear that it would destroy America to have the Democrats in, or maybe they just thought that Kamala Harris or Joe Biden were completely not up to the job, a point I would agree with actually, but you ended up with a situation where they declared that Donald Trump couldn't be prosecuted for January the 6th insurrection, and Donald Trump now has them in his pocket. And so now he's storming around America, breaking federal and state laws left, right and center. The Democrats are trying to mount legal challenges against those, but since the president now can't break the law, the chances of any of those challenges actually sticking and stopping him in his tracks is virtually nil. He released all the 1,500, most of the insurrectionists from the January the 6th riots, and then he's now also, for instance, released 2 police officers who were guilty of a murder as found by the courts, and they corrupted evidence to try and keep themselves out of prison, and he's pardoned them as well. So now the police force is on his side, and that's creating a military police force ultimately, if you're not careful, because if the police are now in his pocket because he's looking after them, and the Supreme Court is in his pocket because they've accidentally absolved him from any risk of prosecution, so now the man can storm on and do whatever he likes, and his unelected appointee, Mr. Musk, Marshall Musk, is flagrantly just running around the organization with his bunch of kiddywinks, creating mayhem, and there's nothing anyone can really do to stop it. And this is how fascism starts. And you may think I'm mad calling this out. I know that some of my dearest friends do. But I also have Americans who I've asked to appear on this channel who have declined to do so because they say they don't want to lose their jobs in the event I ever had an audience bigger than one, you. And that is the chilling effect of fascism on liberty and free speech. We should be afraid, and very afraid, and keep calling it out. And if, as a result, fascism doesn't happen in America, it will only be, I believe, because it has been called out often enough that it's actually managed to put the brakes on Donald Trump somehow. Meanwhile, of course, because he loves autocrats, he's also teamed up with Putin, so poor Ukraine is now being raped from both angles. Putin wants the land, Trump wants the minerals. Trump has ludicrously and dishonestly claimed that Zelensky only has a 4% approval rating when he actually has a 57% improving approval rating. He doesn't call out he doesn't call out Putin for being a dictator, or Xi for being a dictator, but he talks up a man who has put his life on the line to defend his country as a dictator. I mean, it's just ridiculous and it's despicable. And poor Ukraine is now going to be sold down the river because Trump, who claims he knows how to negotiate, gave away all Ukraine's cards right at the beginning of his unilateral negotiation, in which he has not involved Ukraine at all. And so now, in fact, Ukraine, when Trump says Ukraine has got no cards to negotiate on the table, damn right you did, you dishcloth, because you gave them away in your conversations with Putin. And the European Union, meanwhile, are like fighting around like cats in a basket, trying to work out what their response is. And of course, absolutely hopeless so far. We haven't got any real leadership in Europe that can amass, coalesce a support long-term for Ukraine. And Putin has said he won't accept peacekeepers on the ground, and he won't accept America as a long stop. And Starmer has suggested Trump is never going to agree to that anyway. So the whole thing's an absolute dog's dinner, and it's a crying shame. And I feel sorry for our friends in Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia, who must be watching in alarm at what is going on, because they almost certainly will be next. It's a bad week for politics, it's a bad week for democracy, and it's a very sad and bad week for America, a country, incidentally, that I have great fondness for, and have enjoyed living in and visiting frequently, usually once or twice a year. But as a matter of principle, I would not go back to America today because of that, other than the fact I have family there that I love and want to visit. But apart from that, I would not go back to the country as long as Donald Trump is there. Why should I give him my money? Incidentally, the same reason I've never been to Russia, because I won't support Putin and his war machine. In the past, I might have gone before Putin came back into power and started behaving like a megalomaniac that he is. And Hong Kong, another place I absolutely love, and China I've been so impressed by. But they're clearly as our military adversaries, and we will almost certainly end up at war with China at some point, and therefore I won't go back to China or Hong Kong as long as President Xi is battling to retake Taiwan. So there we go. That's me with my little protest. I know that some people here are stopping buying Tesla cars. One of my pals has stopped drinking his favorite Californian wine. Small protests. It won't stop Trump, it won't stop Xi, it won't stop Putin. But one feels one has to do something to protest what's going on in the world, because the world is changing in a way that those of us that have grown up in the post-World War II peace dividend period are finding very hard to adjust to. So, see you later in the week. Bye-bye for now.